Millions of tons of material can cross mines, trains, conveyors, stockyards, shiploaders, and even floating cranes before reaching a single cargo hold. But the real challenge is not moving the material, it is preventing any one transfer point from stopping everything behind it. Join us as we follow this massive flow and discover how engineers keep the entire chain moving. A bulk carrier does not simply arrive and begin loading. Before material can enter its holds, the ship must be brought into the working position of the terminal. Tugboats guide the vessel toward the berth, while crews prepare mooring lines that will hold thousands of tons of steel steady beside the quay. But this ship is only the destination. Behind the ship is a connected system of trains, conveyors, stockyards, and loaders, all built to keep material moving without interruption. So how does that flow stay continuous when every transfer point can become a bottleneck? To find out, we follow the material back to where it first enters the terminal, the train. The first challenge begins with the train. Coal arrives in separate wagons, each carrying its own load, but the equipment beyond the rail line works differently. Conveyors need a steady stream, not a series of isolated batches. That is the job of the wagon tippler. A loaded car is positioned inside the machine, restrained, and rotated so gravity can discharge the material into the receiving system below. From there, the coal can move onto conveyors and continue through the terminal. The important point is not simply that the machine turns a rail car upside down. It converts one form of transport into another. Railways deliver material in discrete units. The terminal has to transform those units into a flow that downstream equipment can handle continuously. The footage shows this handoff clearly. Trains enter the unloading area, wagons are tipped, and the material is transferred towards stacking and conveying systems. A closer view makes the mechanism easier to understand as the car rotates and its load falls away. But this creates a dependency. If the dumper is the gateway between rail transport and the rest of the terminal, its availability matters to everything downstream. And sometimes, that gateway itself has to be replaced. The next challenge is not how the dumper works, but what happens when the terminal depends on it and the machine itself has to be removed. A rotary dumper sits directly in the path between incoming railcars and the material handling system beyond them. When it is taken out of service, the handoff between rail and conveyor disappears with it. That turns replacement into a scheduling problem as much as a lifting problem. The new machine can be assembled beside the operating facility before the shutdown begins. Large circular frames, drive structures, platforms, and supporting sections are prepared on site while cranes and transport equipment are positioned around them. The objective is to complete as much work as possible before the existing dumper is taken out of the line. Once the outage starts, the sequence becomes tightly constrained. The old unit has to be disconnected, lifted clear, and removed from the structure. Openings and supporting steel may need to be modified so the replacement can pass through the same space. A crawler crane then takes the weight of the assembled section and lowers it into position. At this scale, placement is not simply a matter of getting the machine roughly where it belongs. The rotating structure has to line up with the rail path, its supports, and the surrounding equipment that will receive the discharged material. Every major lift, therefore, affects the next step. Other footage shows the same kind of machine being built from massive ring-shaped sections. Cranes rotate and position the components, while workers complete assembly around the structure. The size of the parts makes the reason for offline preparation obvious. Doing this work only after shutdown would keep the material route blocked far longer. That is why the heavy lifts are only one part of the operation. Preparation, access, alignment, and sequencing determine whether a replacement becomes a short interruption or a break in the terminal's material path. This is where the idea of continuous flow becomes more demanding. A terminal can be designed for high throughput, but throughput means nothing while a critical interface is unavailable. The replacement solves that problem only when the railcars can begin moving through the gateway again. And once they do, the next constraint appears immediately. The discharged material has to be carried away fast enough to keep the unloading cycle moving. Once the material leaves the excavation area, large shovels and excavators load it into haul trucks. Each truck carries a separate batch along the mine roads toward the next transfer point. The cycle depends on coordination. Loaders need empty trucks arriving, while loaded trucks must clear the area quickly enough to keep the machines working without interruption. Farther along, the material is transferred into rail cars for longer distance transport. Trains take over from the truck fleet, carrying those separate loads toward the terminal, where another handling system will continue the movement. At the next stage, conveyors turn those repeated deliveries into a continuous stream. The footage shows belts carrying material across the site, technicians inspecting the belt surface, and workers preparing a splice between separate sections. The joint has to become part of the moving belt itself, passing around pulleys while carrying the surrounding load. Large rolls are positioned before the sections are joined. Once the belt is running, the flow can continue steadily towards storage. But if the ship is not ready, that flow still needs somewhere safe to wait. The conveyor does not have to send materials straight to a ship. Much of it can be directed into the stockyard first, where moving equipment builds large piles beside the transport system. The footage shows material being discharged onto these piles, conveyors running around them, and a bucket wheel reclaimer cutting back into the stored bulk. That storage is what separates two parts of the logistics chain. Trains can continue delivering material even when loading at the waterfront is not happening at the same rate. Instead of forcing the entire upstream system to wait, the stockyard absorbs the difference. When material is needed again, the reclaimer reverses the process. Its rotating wheel removes material from the face of the pile and feeds it back into the conveying route. Storage, therefore, is not the end of the flow. It is a controlled pause inside it. From above, the purpose becomes easier to see. Rail lines, stockpiles, conveyors, and a vessel all occupy the same terminal, but they do not have to operate in perfect synchronization. The piles create room between arrival and departure. This buffer also protects continuity. If inbound material arrives before downstream equipment is ready, it can be stored. When loading resumes, the stockyard becomes a source instead of a destination, feeding the next stage without waiting for another train to arrive. The system has solved a timing problem by storing material between two transport modes, but stacking, reclaiming, and transferring large volumes in the open creates another constraint: keeping dust and fine material under control while the flow continues. By the time bulk material is moving continuously, another problem becomes visible: dust. Heavy trucks crossing dry haul roads disturb fine particles each time their tires pass, while water trucks move through the same routes spraying the surface. The footage shows the control process directly. Water is applied across the road, a dosing system prepares the treatment mixture, and the liquid is spread over the travel surface. A grader can still reshape and smooth the road afterward, so dust control becomes part of normal road maintenance. The goal is to keep traffic moving while reducing loose material lifted into the air. The problem appears when coal travels by rail. Instead of treating the road beneath the vehicle, spray systems apply liquid onto the exposed material inside the rail cars. The footage shows repeated passes as the coal surface is sprayed, followed by sections where a foamy treatment is distributed over the load. Applying the treatment at the material itself helps control fine particles while the cargo remains in the transport chain. This distinction matters. Moving material quickly is not enough. The flow also has to remain controlled as it crosses roads, rail cars, transfer points, and storage areas. With the material contained and moving again, the next challenge is physical: carrying that stream across the waterfront and placing it inside a ship. At the waterfront, the final transfer machine begins as a collection of large steel sections. The footage shows plates being cut, structural frames assembled, surfaces coated, and major sections prepared for lifting. Cranes then take over. Completed components are raised, rotated, and brought into position while workers guide the assembly from platforms around the structure. The size of each section makes sequencing important. One piece has to be secured before the next can be added. The machine gradually takes shape around its long supporting frame and boom structure. Unlike a mobile crane, this equipment is built to become part of the terminal itself, connecting the fixed conveyor route on land with a vessel alongside the quay. The footage also shows the completed structure being moved toward the waterfront. By this stage, fabrication has become installation. The purpose of all that steel is now clear: create a rigid, movable path capable of carrying bulk material out over the ship and placing it where the cargo operation needs it inside its holds. Once the loader is in service, the problem is no longer construction. It is controlling where the material goes. The flow arrives from the terminal conveyor and enters the loading structure. From there, it travels through the tower, along the boom conveyor, and toward the loading spout above an open cargo hold. The footage and technical graphics make this route easy to follow. The boom can swing across the vessel, while the outlet changes position over the hatch. That movement matters because the hold is a large volume, not a single target. If the stream stayed fixed, material would build into a steep pile beneath the outlet, while other areas remained empty. The loading spout can be lowered closer to the cargo, reducing the distance the material falls. The outlet can also redirect the stream farther across the hold, allowing material to be distributed without shifting the entire vessel for every adjustment. This is the final coordination problem on the fixed terminal. The conveyor must keep supplying material, while the loading end places it at controlled locations inside the ship. When those movements stay synchronized, the flow can finally cross the quay and enter the vessel, but the solution still depends on fixed infrastructure and stable foundations beside the water. Without that berth, the transfer system has to move offshore. The fixed terminal disappears here. Instead of bringing the large vessel beneath a shore-based loader, smaller barges carry the bulk material alongside it. Excavators work across the barge surface, gathering the cargo and feeding it toward the transfer equipment. From above, the operation looks less like a single machine and more like several moving platforms temporarily connected around one task. The barge provides storage, the excavator keeps material within reach, and the transfer system carries it across the gap to the larger vessel. This changes the nature of the problem. On land, conveyors and structures are anchored in known positions. Here, the material source and the receiving ship are both floating. The transfer equipment has to work between them while the vessels remain safely positioned alongside one another. The objective, however, has not changed. Bulk material still has to become a controlled stream and cross one interface without interrupting the flow behind it. A closer view shows how that interface works. Barges sit beside the larger carrier while grab cranes repeatedly lower into the cargo, close around a load, lift it clear, swing across, and release it into the receiving hold. Inside the hold, an excavator redistributes material that the grab cannot reach efficiently. This keeps cargo accessible to the lifting cycle and helps prevent isolated pockets from slowing the operation as the level changes. Each transfer is therefore a repeated sequence rather than one continuous belt. The crane collects one load, moves it, discharges it, and returns for the next. Overall throughput depends on how consistently that cycle can be repeated and how well the surrounding equipment keeps material within reach. The footage also reveals why positioning matters. Barges, cranes, and the receiving vessel all occupy limited working space. A small change in their relative positions changes the distance and angle the crane must cover. Without a fixed quay, coordination becomes part of the material handling system itself. Wider offshore views add another layer to that coordination. Tugboats maneuver around the operation while barges and the transfer vessel remain alongside the larger ship. Multiple cranes may work at the same time, turning several separate vessels into a temporary loading terminal. This is the major escalation in the process. The fixed stockyard, conveyor route, and ship loader have been replaced by floating storage and repeated crane cycles. Material still moves toward the same destination, but the infrastructure supporting that movement is no longer fixed to the shore. The system now depends on both cargo handling and marine positioning, staying coordinated during transfer. The final views show the same idea from farther away. A large carrier surrounded by smaller working vessels, with bulk material crossing the water between them. What began with trucks, trains, dumpers, conveyors, and stockyards has now been rebuilt as a floating logistics chain. And if the same engineering problem is viewed from the opposite direction, the entire flow can be reversed. Instead of loading material into a ship, the next system must remove it from deep inside the hold. The final stage reverses everything we have followed so far. Instead of moving bulk material toward a ship, the system now has to recover it from deep inside the cargo hold and return it to shore. An inlet feeder gathers the material and directs it into a vertical screw conveyor. From there, the load rises through the machine, changes direction into a horizontal conveyor, and continues toward the terminal handling system. As the cargo level falls, reaching the remaining material becomes harder. Auxiliary machinery works inside the hold to push material back toward the intake, keeping the unloading cycle supplied as the space empties. Control screens and monitoring systems coordinate the moving sections while sensors help protect the equipment operating close to the ship. The direction has changed, but the engineering problem has not. Every interface must keep material moving without allowing one transfer point to break the flow again.